You pour your heart into every single fundraising appeal. You juggle a dozen different tools trying to piece together a clear picture of your supporters. But what if your fundraising platform was built with a deep understanding of those challenges? That's the difference a purpose-built giving platform like Bloomerang can make. Bloomerang customers aren't just fundraising. They are seeing a 27% larger one-time gifts than the industry average. They're growing their supporter base by an average of 12% year over year. And that's the confidence to know who to ask and when. It's the joy of seeing your community rally behind you with greater generosity. It's turning passion into unstoppable momentum. Your purpose is limitless, and your fundraising tools should be too. Learn how you can start raising more at jcsocialmarketing.com/Bloomerang. That's jcsocialmarketing.com/BLOOMERANG. All right, on to the show. Hello, and welcome to Nonprofit Nation. I'm your host, Julia Campbell, and I'm going to sit down with nonprofit industry experts, fundraisers, marketers, and everyone in between to get real and discuss what it takes to build that movement that you've been dreaming of. I created the Nonprofit Nation podcast to share practical wisdom and strategies to help you confidently find your voice, definitively grow your audience, and effectively build your movement. If you're a nonprofit newbie or an experienced professional who's looking to get more visibility, reach more people, and create even more impact, then you're in the right place. Let's get started. Hello, hi, everybody. Welcome to Nonprofit Nation. Welcome back. If you have listened to Nonprofit Nation, thank you to everyone who's decided to put on their earbuds and listen to the podcast today. We have one of my favorite topics, nonprofit communications. And in this episode, I'm interviewing communications specialist Kathleen Tonini to challenge one of the sector's most common traps: mistaking noise for communication strategy. I really see this all the time in my work with nonprofits on their social media and digital strategies, especially. So Kathleen's going to share a little bit about her G.A.M.E framework and how she helps values-driven organizations get clear and confident about how they communicate so they can inspire real action and not just fill inboxes. Welcome to the podcast, Kathleen.
Thank you so much, Julia. I'm really pleased to be here.
From across the world. Yeah, why don't you tell us where you're based and then a little bit about how you came to work with nonprofits?
Sure. So I'm based in Melbourne, Australia, where I live with my husband, my two little girls. And as you said, I'm a strategic communications consultant working with nonprofits. But I haven't always worked with nonprofits. It's been a bit of a long roundabout journey. But the common theme is I've always been really drawn to issues and social change. But yeah, I didn't set out with a plan. For a while in high school, I thought I might be a human rights lawyer. At university, I studied politics, and I just really loved kind of learning about how social movements affected policy. And from there, I worked as a journalist for a couple of years, and then I moved into communications, local government communications for several years. So yeah, I've worked across journalism, government communications, and even policy. But I think the common thread has really been about trying to communicate ideas that can make a difference, can change the world a little bit in some politic way. And then I guess when I had my second daughter, I was looking for kind of more flexible ways to work and use my skills, but not be essentially working full time in an office. It was a bit of a no-brainer to be choosing to work with nonprofits and organizations that align with my values to, branch out into consulting. I was keen to help particularly nonprofits who are often operating in an environment without being fully resourced and with lots of money to be a bit more strategic about what they do, if possible.
So you are very interested in policy, and I didn't actually ask you if you were comfortable talking politics, but I don't know if in Australia the nonprofit sector is under attack like it is in America. Right before we hit record, I received a text message that the National Broadcasting Corporation and NPR and a lot of the national radio stations, the Senate voted to completely, and that's, I think, happened. I think it's a very common thread in the sector right now. And I wonder what's the tone in in Australia? What's the tone in Melbourne right now?
Completely different politically. For sure, the nonprofit sector is always like a little bit under pressure, but nothing like in the United States. In terms of like funding for national services, like for sure that our national broadcaster goes through political cycles where they threaten to cut funding, but I don't think it's at all comparable. So possibly, most of the organisations I work with are Australian, but I think that context is different at the moment. So I really feel for it. Everyone working in the knockout through in America at the moment. I can't. It's hard for us to kind of imagine.
I think it's hard for people around the world to truly understand like what is occurring right now and looking at us like we're all nuts. But that's why actually this topic I think is even more relevant, because in this climate where everything is doom and gloom, I mean, that's kind of how I'm looking at it. A lot of the news coming at us is incredibly urgent, incredibly crisis oriented. And for nonprofits that really want to get their message out there, I do think it's incredibly challenging in a regular environment, let alone in this environment. So you help organizations get clear and confident with their messaging. What does messaging clarity mean to you is sort of in this context?
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. To me, it means knowing exactly who you're speaking to and what you want them to do. So I think like some people get some of this right. They might have some idea of who they're talking to, but I think a lot of people get a bit lost on what they're wanting that personal group to do. So who you're talking to, what you want them to do, and why is in essence what messaging clarity means to me. And like there's more detail you can add on to that, like how you're framing that message to make people care about it, and how specific you are being about who that audience is. And I think that's really, as you said, it's important in a context where you're operating with limited resources and time. It also it's basically makes it easier for that person to know they're being spoken to in terms of how specific you're being.
And why is raising awareness not a real strategy? I'm in complete agreement with you on that one.
I think that, I feel really strongly about this one. I think it's two reasons. The first is you can't measure it. How do you measure if someone's awareness has been raised? Or possibly you could if you had a really huge budget and you could go and survey people's awareness of something. But most people don't have money to do that. So it's very hard to measure in the first instance. And it's not tied to an outcome. And I think while awareness can be the first step in getting someone to change a behaviour in itself, the evidence is quite clear that someone being aware of something doesn't lead them to do whatever it is you want them to do, to take action, change their behaviour. So two things really. The first being that it's hard to measure. So your investment is not tied to an outcome. And B, it doesn't in itself change anyone's behaviour. So as you said, it can be more common than people might like to admit. Like I was scrolling on LinkedIn, my LinkedIn feed the other day, and I saw maybe 4 or 5 different to very similar style posts, basically a well-designed static graphic from like whatever kind of advocacy body it was about day of, week of, month of kind of awareness. And it was just saying that we're supporting X and there's no story attached to that. There's no call to action. It's just trying to tell someone something. But I always see those posts and I'm unclear what I'm meant
What am I supposed to do?
Right. Yeah. What am I meant to do with that? And I think it comes down to people thinking that they have an obligation to just share information, but it's not strategic in how they're thinking about what they want that person to do with that information. So, and also I think that there is evidence that it doesn't, like even if it's really good, like content, unless it's tied to a kind of outcome, it may not necessarily be effective. And I was trying to think of an example for this, and there's an Australian one from several years ago. It was, I don't know if you heard of it, it was called Dumb Ways to Die. And it was a government campaign to stop people walking in front of trains at crossings.
I think I did hear of this. Dumb Ways to Die. Well, it immediately catches your attention.
Yes, it won a lot of awards for being really catchy. It was like a video that was, basically went viral. Everyone knew about it. Everyone heard about it. But it was really like the follow-up kind of analysis of that campaign was a bit unclear about whether it really had changed the number of people being hit by a train. So there's a difference between really good, like kind of catchy content and how that relates to behavior change. And even when and particularly when it's also, there's a lot of non-catchy, non-kind of viral content out there, which is basically just trying to raise awareness without making it easy for whoever that person or audience is to take action with that knowledge, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. I always say, I can help you go viral tomorrow. All you have to do is do something, go streaking down the middle of the street. You'll go viral, but it's sort of like you're not going viral for the right reason. You're not driving the action that you want to take. And it's like you said, you get a lot of eyeballs on it, but so what? Like, does it move the needle? Does it get people to take action? So that leads me to my next question. Like, what do you think are sort of the key differences between this kind of communication and messaging that looks really good versus communications that actually move people to action?
Well, yeah, I think the first part of it comes down to if you see it or interact with it, does it make you feel anything? So like absolutely the eyeballs bit. So there is still a lot of communications that I see from nonprofits which doesn't even get that first bit right. It's like I saw a post from a counselling organisation that I follow, like a domestic violence counselling organisation the other day, and they'd done a carousel style post, like infographics of the number of women in each region that they served who had been assaulted in the past year. And the numbers were high and it was like clear information, but I looked at it and I felt absolutely nothing. And like I should feel something. The numbers in themselves were shocking, but they were not presented in a way that told any kind of story or had any impact. So I think like the first bit is about, I think, feeling something when you see whatever it is. Do I feel part of that or, a sense of duty or obligation or that you empathize with that? And then I think the other bit of it is in terms of what good comms is when the action that you take almost feels inevitable because the campaign and the environment that you're in has been almost built to ensure that it's actually really hard for you to not take that action. Like, for example, I thought of is also another Australian one from several years ago, and it was a water saving campaign for Melbourne, and they had a very severe drought. It was called Target 155. So, like, basically all the water corps in Melbourne got together and realised they needed to get people to use less water because their water reserves were running out. But rather than trying to tell people to use less water, they came up with a specific figure in the number of litres per day they wanted each household to use or each person. And they built a campaign about getting people to only use no more than 155 litres a day. And they did that with a mix of, comms tools and also policy kind of interventions. So they put on people's bills how much water they were using and compared to the target. They had an update on the evening news during that campaign period of how the city as a whole was tracking towards that target. They had the target kind of tracking on billboards, like everywhere. Wow. But they also had things like, incentives for upgrading your, to dual flush on your toilet and a water efficient shower head. So they gave people the tools that they needed. The comms was along the lines of really detailed fact sheets about a 4-minute shower and how much that saves, as opposed to just saying, use less water. It was like, keep your shower to 4 minutes.
So more very specific. I like that because if you tell me use less water, I don't really know what that means.
And I think they also used the kind of peer pressure isn't the right word, but like because it was a clear community and everyone was working towards the same thing.
Yeah, it's everyone's in this together kind of thing.
Exactly. Yeah. So it was a combination of specific, like real life, actual water saving things, plus very clear comms about 155, 4-minute showers, what each bucket, how many buckets of water you can save by doing whatever. And I guess the threat of if the city couldn't bring its water use down, that they'd face harsher restrictions. It's probably a mix of like good policy as well as good comms. But to me, what that speaks to is like basically being very clear about that behavior and like creating a whole environment where that behavior is almost inevitable. And it's an example of a well-funded kind of government campaign, but the lesson is, I think, applicable to nonprofits too, is like, how do you make that thing that you want someone to do very, very easy using whatever tools you have, including communications? People shouldn't have to be thinking, oh, how do I do that? Or I'm not quite sure what they want me to do with that information.
Exactly.
To give them information over and over again. You need to make the steps super easy. You need to make the call to action very clear, those kind of things. So, yeah, I think you've got to feel something. And then you've got to be guided to take that action as much as possible.
I absolutely think you're right, especially in digital marketing and fundraising, which is really my area of expertise. If you say, give $5 today or give $10 to be a monthly donor, that actually has been shown, at least in the United States, to increase the number of conversions that you're going to have, because then people, they're not thinking about, oh, what is everyone else donating? What's the number that I should donate? That you're knocking down those obstacles and that kind of analysis paralysis, and you're making it super, super easy for them. I know that you're also focused on communications that drive results. So like, why does it matter where an organization's communications are driving results?
Well, I think, you really just said it right then. The reason why this matters is because it's a difference between results or not. And
yes,
so that could be donations, it could be event attendance, it could be getting volunteers, like whatever specific thing your organization needs at that time. The difference between good communications and not is that those real life actions that you get people to take. So like, to me, that's the main reason. If you're a bit strategic about how you use your communications resources, you can get a real life result. And I think the other kind of reasons why this matters is if your communications investment, like your resources or advertising, whatever it is, isn't tied to results, you could argue that's a wasted investment. So if you're tying your time and money to results, you're going to waste less time and money. So I think that's important when you've got limited resources. And I think the other one, which is perhaps less tangible, but I think people do benefit from, is the clarity and confidence you get from knowing what your message is, knowing that it's well thought out, and not having to be like, I'm not sure what to say here, or what should I be posting about? Who am I talking to? Any of those potential questions mostly removed when you've got a clear plan about what you're doing. Helps you cut through the noise a little bit, I think. So yeah, the main reason is real life results, but there's some perhaps secondary benefits of being sure that your resources are not being wasted.
I get this question all the time when nonprofits are asking me about like paid advertising strategies. Should I boost this post? Should I create an ad around this? And I think you need to start with the goal in mind, the result that you want to achieve. Yeah. So when you're saying, should I boost this post? Well, I can't answer that question for you because I don't know what you want to achieve. And I don't know what that cost is worth to you. Like if you say you want to boost a post around event attendance, if you spend $50 and an event ticket is $100 and you get one event ticket, well, then you've made your money back. But if it's something like, oh, I just want a lot of people to watch this video. Okay, well then take a step back even further, drill down even more and say, what is the result from people watching this video? Is that the right approach to take, do you think?
Yeah, like what do you want people to do with this information? Because communication shouldn't just be an output. It's a process to get a result. I would really challenge people to not think of it as something you just spend money on without a result in mind, because I think, unless you have a huge budget and great staffing and you're able to just put time and effort into visibility for its own sake, then what's the point? Like people are busy and like overwhelmed with information. So what do you want people to do with that? Yeah, exactly what you said. What do you want to achieve with it? And that will help answer whether you should be boosting that post.
Well, let's talk about your G.A.M.E framework. I love a framework. My audience loves like a tactical framework that they can use. Do you mind walking us through the steps really quickly? I think it's a really fantastic thing to have in your brain. And I love a good acronym.
Yep, sure. So G.A.M.E is goal, audience, message, engage. And it's pretty basic, but it does work. And I think as we've just kind of discussed, a lot of organizations skip the first couple of steps, skim over the message bit, and usually straight onto the engage, as in how am I getting my message out, which is probably not the best way to approach it. So G goal is about that action you're trying to get people to take, and really about being as specific as possible and linking it to the individual action you want people to take. So like your high level goal might be, we want to get 200 people to attend this event, but the goal you're trying to get your audience to take is to book their ticket by a certain time, I guess. So super, super specific. Like I really think that's about linking your goal to like a high level organization goal too, not just a goal of getting a certain number of views on that video, because what does that achieve? It's about what's the strategic goal that supports your organization that you're trying to do, and how does that relate to your audience's action? So that's goal. Then audience is who you're talking to. So basically it's stakeholder analysis. Who are your most impactful or influential stakeholders? And I think a lot of people skip over this. It's, I mean, perhaps not the most exciting thing to be doing, but at an organisation level and also for each project or specific project level, you should be able to work out who cares the most about and who can influence what happens the most. And then you spend a little bit of time thinking about how that person, what their interests are and how they like to receive information. So that's about knowing who you're talking to. Then message is related to your audience. It's about crafting a message. It doesn't have to be super creative or anything that speaks to that audience. So what do they care about? And ensuring that you pick up some of those things that they care about, what you want them to do with that. So that's being clear with a call to action, but ideally framed in a way that speaks to the audience you've already identified.
Yes.
The key audience. So then engage is literally the tools you choose to get your message out, which is, as I said, I think a lot of people skip there first. They're like, okay, so
they just like, I'm going to go on Facebook. Yeah. But they don't have any of the other steps in place yet.
Yes. And I think when you go back to your audience, your stakeholders, it makes the choice of methods simpler, because if you know, for example, your target audience is actually, I don't know, over 60s in a certain area, like maybe TikTok doesn't need to be part of your key kind of methods that you choose. What's another example of that? Basically, like, think about who you're talking to and how they like to receive information. Another one I think people skip over is using the tools they already have. Like, are you already meeting with these people?
Yes. They always want to add on new tools. They think there's going to be some savior tool.
Usually there isn't. It's about using a combination of what you're already doing. And I generally think people should favor the most direct, sometimes traditional methods first. Like, how can you talk to those people in a meaningful way? And then the broader generic advertising can come as well. But that's more of an add-on for just to pick up the stragglers rather than being the core part of your strategy, if that makes sense.
Right.
So,
absolutely.
Where the people are.
If you don't have your G.A.M.E framework and you're starting to run Facebook ads, they're not going to work because you're not understanding what action you're trying to drive. You don't know who you're talking to. You don't know the message that, it's not even the message that we are trying to communicate. It's the message that they want to hear. It's the message that they are welcome to receiving. That is a key piece of communication that I think nonprofits get wrong often, is that, we have a great mission. We're doing amazing work. Yes, you are. But people don't necessarily understand what you do. They don't necessarily understand that this is a problem in the community and what is the message that you're conveying that is sort of in their interest. It's talking to them in the way they want to be talked to. So I think all of this is super important. So I do a lot of audits, and I know, and I like that you propose a no burn down method for messaging audit. I try to propose a no burn down method for my social media audits, but sometimes it doesn't work. But what's a practical way that a busy team can kind of review their strategy in this way without kind of scrapping everything?
Yes. Well, look, it's a funny phrase, but I mean it in a way like most organizations don't have the time or inclination to start from scratch. So let's try and be practical with what people can actually do. So, I mean, there's a few things, but I think like the first thing that to make sense to me is, so like, look where you're getting results. So what's working? So look across what you're putting out and see where you're getting the most engagement. So, are you getting responses when you send out emails? Are you getting comments or shares on your social media? Like, that's a first sign that you're doing something right, because you will need some channels. So I would start with what's working. And if it's clearly not and you're very stretched, like, I would look at cutting some of if you've got multiple channels and none of them are giving you good results, like, I would say condense, pick the few that are working the best and really concentrate on them.
You do not have to be everywhere. You don't have to be.
Yeah, you really, really don't. Like, that's a big thing that I always tell people. Is the other one I kind of mentioned, if you're spending money on like advertising and it's not tied to a result, I would suggest pausing that and reviewing that with the lens of what outcome can I get from this and how can I measure it? Because unless you have unlimited money, I think you should be able to tie your advertising to some kind of result. So that's a simple thing. If you are spending money on advertising, which not everyone is. I think another practical one would be if you've got an annual budget for comms, like choosing one goal, one event you want to promote, if it's a fundraising goal, and trying to organize your resources around that goal rather than spending a bit on here, a bit on there. I would target it around that one goal. And if that means choosing not to talk about other issues for a while, I think that's okay. I think that something that has more impact is better than multiple things that have way less impact. And I think because this is really all just elements of the G.A.M.E framework step by step. But the other one would be is if an organisation can take the time to look at their stakeholders in detail, I think you really can't. That's such a good investment of time to sit down, map your stakeholders on a project level or at your whole organisation level, who they are, what they care about, how to talk to them. That could really help your communications in so many ways.
My next question is probably being asked, because I know my audience very well. I know my stakeholders. I've done the due diligence. I've talked to them. I really listened to their emails and their questions and their comments on social media. And I can already hear some of their questions. They are totally on board with what you're saying, right? So say I'm a director of marketing. I am fully invested. I want to do this. But the problem is the communications is often like a to-do list. The board is telling me I have to get out a press release. And then the executive director is telling me, why don't I post more on Facebook? So how can we convince other people in our organization to move from communications as a to-do list or just a task to communications as like a strategy that's going to move the mission?
That's a good question. I think I would go back, if I could, with an alternate proposal with here's the goal and here's how we're going to use communications to meet it. And rather than, because I'm sure you can't just say, no, I don't want to do that. It's more about here's an alternate solution. So if that was me, I would basically map it out of what I wanted to do with the goal, think about what the organisation, what the board or the executive might be interested in to achieve, whether that's a certain fundraising goal or recruiting volunteers, whatever that need is. And then I would go back and map it out how you were going to use your comms for a certain period of time to drive that goal, I guess. Yeah, I think articulating that what that benefit would be as opposed to communicating for the sake of it, I think that's what I would do.
Saying like, yeah, exactly. Let's stop just throwing spaghetti at the wall and sending press releases out that don't mean anything because they're not even getting us to our goal because no one's reading them. And we're only doing it because we have to do it. I guess that's probably the biggest obstacle probably that you face in your work with nonprofits is the status quo. It's like, we've always done it this way.
Yeah.
Why are we trying something new?
Yeah, it is. It's definitely a challenge to the way people approach communications usually, because to them, if they get a press release out there or they, that's the result in itself. So
right. Just the doing of the task. Oh my gosh, that makes me crazy.
Yes. Which I think maybe it's just a misunderstanding of communications as kind of a process. But I guess I should it's not a bad thing to have, visibility for its own sake as well. That can be part of a big strategy too. But when you don't have unlimited time and resources, some of that stuff is way less valuable than people think, because you see an article in the paper. How can you prove that changed anything? They are interested in what serves them and they're overwhelmed by information. Like, think about how you feel when you scroll on your phone. Like, most of it is like, I can't deal with this. So if you're not being clear, you're really adding to that noise. And I would really challenge people to think, what is it that I'm doing and how will it change someone's behavior? Ideally.
Exactly. It bothers me so much when I drive down the highway and I see an ad for a nonprofit that just says we are the food bank. And then it has their website. And I think, how much money did you spend? I don't know what I'm supposed to do. Also, how can you measure results if you're just sending me to your homepage of your website? That is one thing. It's like, oh, great, we have a billboard. A lot of people are seeing it. But what action are they actually taking at the end of the day?
Exactly. And even if you could measure eyeballs on that billboard, which you can't, but you can measure impressions on a social media post. what do those impressions mean in real life? Did someone go and do what you wanted them to do, or really did they just scroll past? I mean, mostly they scroll past because people will.
It is.
Yeah. And like, as you say, a food bank, what does that tell them about the impact of that food bank and how your donation might impact someone's life? Or how does it show how that food bank is any different to any other food service? Like, there's so many services out there. What's different about yours, and how can your impact, how can you individually be part of that?
No, it's so frustrating. Bad communications. That's like also my pet peeve. Or not bad, but just communications that could be more effective is what I try to say. So what is one simple shift that an organization, someone listening today could make to clarify their message? Like this week, what's just like, is there some simple shift that they could make?
I feel like I've probably already said it, but yeah, really, what do I want someone to do with this piece of information that I'm giving them?
Yes.
So is it a call to action on your post, or is it a link to what you want them to do? And like, obviously there are, exceptions to constantly driving people to action. Like, obviously there's a place for kind of high level kind of educational content sometimes, and behind the scenes content, all that stuff. But overall, I would be saying, what do I want someone to do with this information? And if you don't want someone to do with anything to do with that information, you can strongly consider not sending it out. Like, go back, what do I want someone to do with it? Add a clear call to action. That would be like one simple thing that I think people could start to do.
Absolutely. And I really think it's so funny. I always think when I talk about communications and messaging that it's intuitive, but a lot of people don't talk about it and do it every single day and teach people every single day. It's not something that they do. They want to make the world a better place. They're focused on their programming. They're focused on their mission and their vision. They're not focused on, tweaking the messaging because, they're doing 90 other things. Like a lot of nonprofit professionals have 45 other duties as assigned, or they're a one-person shop. So all of this has been very just simple and streamlined and straightforward, and I really appreciate it. So Kathleen, where can people learn more about you and your work and connect with you? Are you on LinkedIn? Are you on the socials? What's your website?
I think that, the easiest way for people to reach out is LinkedIn or Instagram. And I, link back to my website. But in the first instance, I think LinkedIn and Instagram are, if anyone has any questions or anything, I'm more than happy to answer them. And I'm keen to hear what people thought, I guess.
Yes, I love that. Okay, I will put those in the show notes. If you want to contact Kathleen, feel free to get in touch. But thanks so much for being here on the podcast and just for being, across the world. And I know you've got 2 really young kids and scheduling can be a bear. I know you're on winter break. We are on summer break here. But thanks so much for being on the podcast.
No, my absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, hey there. I wanted to say thank you for tuning into my show and for listening all the way to the end. If you really enjoyed today's conversation, make sure to subscribe to the show in your favorite podcast app, and you'll get new episodes downloaded as soon as they come out. I would love if you left me a rating or a review, because this tells other people that my podcast is worth listening to. And then me and my guests can reach even more earbuds and create even more impact. So that's pretty much it. I'll be back soon with a brand new episode. But until then, you can find me on Instagram at JuliaCampbell77. Keep changing the world, you nonprofit unicorn.